it's supposed to be the end. It's the last chapter, right at the end of this collection of books we call the Bible. A collection that starts with the words, "in the beginning." And so in the last chapter of the last letter, it's supposed to be the end, right? The whole concept of how things are supposed to be is an interesting idea. I wonder how many of my ideas about how things are supposed to be are my ideas, or are they second-hand ideas from other people? Hearing what something is supposed to be like is no substitute for finding out for yourself. It turns out there's no substitute for the real thing. So in this letter called The Revelation, let's say I forget what's supposed to be in there. What have I found? Well, it turns out I found a writer, and we call him John, who comes across as an artist, an inspired craftsman, throwing words at the page to try and capture something, pictures, visions, experiences, angles, perspectives, and all brought together, jammed together, piled on top of each other to reveal something, to expose something, to uncover what he says are deep truths and realities. And all of this with a passion underneath it to motivate, to provoke, to comfort, to challenge his listeners. His listeners being people, groups of Jesus followers struggling in the first century in the face of the Roman Empire machine. What I found in here is that despite being supposed to be a letter about the end, most of this letter is not about the end. Instead, it's been about a now, or at least the now of a first century ancient Near East struggling to live out the way of this Jewish teacher called Jesus of Nazareth in the face of an empire culture that works against it. In this letter has been a poetic, artistic diagnosis piercing the reality, showing what's really going on again and again in human history down the ages. So this work of art has revealed again that things aren't the way they're supposed to be. That there are ideas that humans are being sold about what they're supposed to do, who they're supposed to be. And these ideas, seductive as they are actually destructive. And so this letter is inspired as a warning and at the same time a comfort. And what's revealed, uncovered, is that our reality, the reality, even though it's not always sensed or glimpsed, is that the God who created all things, who then changed everything in the life and death and resurrection of Jesus of Nazareth, and that's why you're a Jesus follower in the first century anyway. This God's always been working to put things back together again. And there's more than that. There's a reason for you to keep struggling, to endure, to keep going, because everything that gets in the way of what is supposed to be has been dealt with somehow in the life and the death and the resurrection of that Jesus of Nazareth, or as John in these visions in this letter calls him, the Lamb. I found in here that only right at the end this letter does present visions of what things will be like in this restored, renewed, recreated world where things are finally put to rights, which is just, according to this, a matter of time. This is not a vision of how it's supposed to be. This is a vision of how it's going to be. And so the imagery that John brings to this final set of pictures is a city where God lives with his people. Here, not somewhere else. And through the centre of the city is a river of the water of life. A river of the water of life. This part's supposed to be the end, but it sounds an awful like the beginning. You see, described in that start of this collection, in that set of poems and songs and family stories that we call Genesis, one of the first images used is of God's good creation like a garden with a river of life and a tree of life. And those are both here at the end. But that was the beginning. Are we going back there? Well, we read on and not exactly. Because as John describes these experiences, the picture is of a city, not a garden. Although it has a river of life and it has trees that bear fruit all year round for everyone. So maybe it's more of a garden city. But what it seems like is that this story is not going backwards. This story is not going full circle. This story has always been going somewhere. The story has been about life moving forward and developing as it was made to be, to reach its potential. A story about life. And so this image of a garden city is an image of the community, the relationships of God's people and God and his creation, made as they were made to become. The tree by the river is interesting because not only is this tree now accessible, and remember in the Genesis story, the tree became inaccessible when humans started to choose to go their own way and choose to muck things up. But here, the tree's accessible, but the tree has leaves that have a job, a purpose, a task. It says the leaves of the tree are for healing. And not just any healing, but for the healing of the nations. Hang on a second. In these stories, all the way through the story of God's people, the Israelites, the Hebrews, in the life and history of this God and his people that he's chosen and created, the idea of the nations tends to mean all the other nations. Nations that aren't the Israelite nation. In other words, the Gentiles, or quite often just the dogs. These nations keep attacking Israel. These nations have other gods. These nations symbolize the enemies of God's project. Surely Israel is the chosen nation. Surely the leaves in this vision should be supposed to be for the healing of this one nation. The other nations are supposed to end up in the fire, aren't they? Here's a problem with relying too much on how things are supposed to be, or second-hand ideas, for so many people, even followers of God. The idea that they hold about how things are supposed to be is that anyone not on our side, not in our club, anyone who's not done the right thing or not got the right badge or passed the right test or worked out what the secret is, at best these people, other people, will one day realise just how wrong they were, and they will come to get their just desserts, to say sorry or something worse. But that's not what this vision is. It seems that's not what this God's vision is. It turns out that God's plan has been bigger than his people can hold in their heads all along. And yet, it's never been a secret. When God called a man called Abraham to be the start of a tribe, a people, a nation, he made them a promise that they would be a blessing to all peoples. In this letter, the Revelation, the picture of a new heavens and earth is one where God comes here to be among the peoples. Plural, it says. It doesn't say he comes to be among the people. If we were to work our way through these stories of God and his creation, God and his people, we would find on just about every page, at every stage, a God who always had a bigger plan. A bigger plan, a bigger space, a bigger invitation for everyone and everything. there's a joke that the only thing that might spoil the new heaven and the new earth for some of us is finding out who else is there with us. What also might come as a surprise is what we will be doing in this new creation. Yes, the vision is of all the barriers gone. Yes, there will no longer be the curse that was there in the start of the story. There will no longer be the enemy, no longer the opposition, no longer any of the destructive cancers that attack God's creation project. And yes, the relationships between God and his people, between his people and each other, and the relationship between humanity and the creation around us will all be restored and repaired. And we will see God face to face, nothing in the way. So surely then we're supposed to sit back and relax. Maybe have our crowns fitted. What John sees in his vision is that we will serve. Hang on again. Is that supposed to be in there? I prefer the part where it says we will reign forever, but not serve. Although now I think about it, in the reigning part, if all the nations are there, then who would I be reigning over? Why would I be surprised by this? Look back through these stories. See them firsthand. It turns out that right from the beginning, this was always part of the plan, part of God's story, part of God's promise. This God created humanity to be partners with him to work the creation, to take care of it, to be partners in bringing it to its potential. That's what I was made for. Why wouldn't be that what I get to do in the new creation? Not to sit around, but to do what I was made to do and to get the life that brings. God saved the Israelite people from their slavery, not to be a cozy club of the saved, but to be a kingdom of priests, to be a blessing, to be part of God's work of putting the creation back together, to be a light, a blessing to all nations, a blessing machine. This vision says we will get to reign forever. But what is reigning after all? What is a king or a ruler or anyone with a responsibility for anyway? The kings of Israel. In the words of an outsider, the Queen of Sheba, in a story where she meets Solomon, are for, she says, maintaining justice and righteousness. To reign means to take care of, to serve. This is how it is supposed to be. I was made to serve, to be a blessing, part of the blessing, to be partners with God, to take care, to bring things to their potential. And that's work that happens now and will happen in a much realer and fuller way, in a way I can't even imagine now in the new creation. That's what I get to do, but that's what I will get to do and to be. And so this revelation ends, not like I thought it was supposed to end, with an ending, but with a new beginning, a new life, more than I could ever have imagined.